Hello, I have your attention. We'll go ahead and get started. It's a little bit after 12. We may have some people kind of mingling in, but my name is Lisa Mitchell-Redden, and I'm the Vice Chair for the Diversity Advisory Council. How many people in here are not familiar with DAC? Oh, good. Then my job is done. No, I just want to kind of let you know that kind of mission and the plan that we have for this year. And we kind of came to a decision to focus on disability awareness this year as a council. I think about 2 years ago, we had a joint meeting with our leaders in the bank, and we talked about areas of the bank that we could improve in. And one of those areas was disability awareness. So we had an article came out a little earlier this year kind of announcing that. How many people had the opportunity to see the article? That's good. So this is one of our many events that we're going to have this year, whether it's disability focused, we'll have other articles, displays, different things that the DAC is going to put on this year. So this is our first Lunch and Learn, I think, in the history of DAC. So that's a big, major accomplishment right here. We have an excellent speaker here today, but I'm going to kind of hand it over to Anita to talk a little bit about our speaker and what we have planned for you today. So, Anita Brown.
Thank you guys so much for joining us. We're very, very excited about all of the work that the DAC is doing, and our focus on disabilities is one that is near and dear to our hearts. This is the first of many activities that we will have, and so we thank you for your support. Jessica Mayer is sitting here. She came all the way from New York City to spend some time both with the DAC and with the bank staff during this Lunch and Learn. We had the opportunity to spend about an hour with her this morning, and I can say that she has some very wonderful perspectives on how we can accept and how we can respect those of our coworkers with disabilities. But I wanted to tell you just a little bit about Jessica. Jessica has been an advocate for disability awareness for way over 20 years. And in 1995, she started her own company, an entrepreneur. And although she was engaged in other employment, she said she got totally bored to death and thought she wanted to do something fun. And she thought starting a company that would allow her to advocate individuals with disabilities was a good thing to do, and we're glad that she chose that. Jessica's company provides disability awareness training and workshops, and so she has a lot of experience in this area. She has a very good sense of humor. She wants us to be very open and candid. There's, as she said, there's no question that you cannot ask her today. All the gloves are off, and so we're very excited about this unique opportunity to be able to get some insights from a very experienced and observing person. Jessica Mayer.
Well, Jessica's coming up. I do want to mention that if anyone has comments, we're going to have to use the mics because the branches are on the line as well. Okay.
Taxi! Sam, come on!
I'd just like to say, I think you're very brave.
Hi, I'm Robert Kesey. I'm here for the...
For the interview?
Yeah, sorry I'm late. I couldn't find...
I'm sure that's okay.
Taxi. Sorry, I can't
Oh,
read.
they shouldn't be long.
No, but I just can't...
You're welcome.
Come in.
What's going on?
He's able-bodied.
How good of you to come. Why don't you take a seat? Now, take as much time as you need.
Hey, I had a friend who had all his limbs once. It's great.
No, I didn't get it. I mean, it's as if they weren't even listening to me. I don't know. Listen, I've got to go. I'll tell you about it later, okay? Yeah, 8 o'clock. I'm wearing a light grey suit, purple shirt, burgundy tie. Okay, then. Bye.
Sorry, mate. Wheelchairs only.
What?
Well, I don't make the rules.
Sorry.
So what did everybody think about that? Funny, interesting, gave you a different perspective? I'm going to tell you a little bit about me, and then hopefully we'll have the time to run it. We'll see as much as we can get through, okay? This is a little speech I wrote. Hope that you like it. Okay. The funny thing is that I was actually in London one time, and it's funny that that is a British story, and I was in a pub with a friend of mine, and we were sitting in this pub, and this woman comes up and says, "Would you like to buy a raffle for cerebral palsy?" And my friend looks at her and says, points at me and says, "She's already won that." So I have CP, not MS, not MD, not CBS, not NBC, it's CP. So this is my story, nobody else's, and I take full responsibility for what I'm about to tell you. So anyway, I wasn't always able to laugh at my disability. In fact, I couldn't even talk about it. Growing up was very painful for me, and I got my share of teasing and bullying. I had gum thrown in my hair on a regular basis and was called retard. Basically, kids were just miserable to me in school. My parents were divorced, and my father was not a loving and caring person. Basically, I've had a lot of hurdles to overcome. I wish I could tell you that it made me, that I had some kind of revelation or epiphany, but I didn't, about being teased, except maybe to be kinder to other people. People and mean kids just stink. Or maybe, or whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger. That's not true. What doesn't kill you doesn't make you stronger. Hopefully it just makes you a kinder and hopefully more empathetic person. But I've also been fortunate in many ways too. I have a very loving and supportive mother, for the most part, but we all know how moms can be. And I've had people in my life who love and care about me, and of course I feel the same way about them. From 7th to 10th grade, I attended a camp where I actually had friends. It was a creative arts camp in New Milford, Connecticut called Bucks Rock. I had friends, I was talented, wow! I was creative and smart, who knew? Who knew I could do all these things? One summer when I left camp, a counselor who knew about my stories, about school and everything, once said to me, "You know who you are in your heart, so don't let any bleep heads bleep you up." eloquent words, I thought. That one sentence got me through an entire year. I just kept on thinking about what he had said to me. Only recently did he know that the words had so much impact on me. In high school, I was a member of an adolescent theater group dealing with adolescent problems. I spoke about my disability because I had to, but in a way, I could talk about it without having to be disabled. My character was disabled, so therefore, I didn't have to really be that way. And remember, denial just isn't a river in Egypt. Okay, boo. You can boo me if you want to, I don't care. The shame of being disabled and feeling like I was stupid was too much for me to bear, so I kept it as a very separate part of my problem. Besides being called a retard all the time, I began to believe it, and also my physical disability, which affected my fine motor coordination skills, not my gross motor coordination skills. So, in essence, walking, no problem. Reading, writing, typing, big problem. So, whereas I function more like a learning disabled person, even though I was one with a physical disability. And the things that people considered intellectual were things that I wasn't good at. So that also made me feel not very bright. But I've come to realize that we need all different kinds of intelligence in this world. Anybody see the movie about Temple Grandin? Raise your hand. It was wonderful, wasn't it? I mean, to think that that woman is autistic, yet she sees everything, and she's so brilliant in some ways, but she doesn't get along well with people, and she sees things so differently, and we need that in this world. So we need all different kinds of intelligence. Along the way, I met my friend Adam in high school. One of the reasons why this friendship was so easy for us was because I was gay, because he was gay and I was disabled. I didn't mean to say that. Wait, Adam is gay, I was disabled. I'm like, not that there's anything wrong with it. But anyway, two people who felt like they didn't go very well together found each other in our both being teased and both being maligned by our peers. Two people, I loved his kindness and his sense of humor and his gentle soul. I tell you the story not because I'm some kind of wonderful person who has all different kinds of friends, even though I am. I tell you the story because disability, the experience of disability is not that different from any other marginalized group. In fact, Adam and I are still best friends today. In college, I needed support, lots of support services like readers, writers, note takers, and unlimited time tests. Untimed tests, excuse me. See, I do have a reading disability, but that's okay. Bear with me. Keep on going, bear with me. Okay, unfortunately, the real world did not offer such accommodations in 1986 when I graduated from college. So, getting a job for me was a huge problem. After all, what was I qualified to do? I was a theater major. So I sat on my bed in my apartment in Ithaca, crying, thinking that this was the end of my life. This was it for me. I was never going to get a job. And commencement is supposed to be the beginning. To me, it felt like the end. So I went back to New York with no jobs or no prospects. And everybody had a suggestion for me, thankfully most of which I didn't take. My mother's suggestion was for me to learn how to type. Well, most people who get typing jobs type 60, 70, 80 to 100 words a minute. Try 3 or 4 with a lot of mistakes for me. So that wasn't going to work. And this was before computers. This was really like before computers were really big. Become a social worker. I had enough of my own problems. Become a teacher, not. And my personal favorite, which was, and those days we used to be called handicapped, now we're called disabled. So work with handicapped people. You're handicapped, you should work with handicapped people, you would be good at it. So that was always my personal favorite one. I even tried going to some of these social service agencies that help people with disabilities get work. One guy, one of the workers there asked me if I got along well with normal people. Swear to God. He asked me if I got along well with normal people. So I said to him, I don't understand your question. I grew up in a household with my brother and my father, and there's the 2 least normal people I know, and they're not even disabled. Finally, I got a job working for the city of New York. I may have been confused about what I wanted to do, but I knew I didn't want to work in the disability field. And of course, that's exactly where I wound up doing. Okay, I was desperate. I also found out that I was good at it, and I met a lot of people at work who I still keep in touch with today. One of the smartest moves that I ever made was my boss. I offered assistance to my boss at the time to help him with a group of Japanese people that were coming to New York, because Tokyo and New York City are sister cities. So they have trips to Tokyo and baseball trips and other trips. So I helped bring a group of Japanese people here with disabilities, Japanese people with disabilities. And I met a lot of people during that experience, and some of them who I've kept in contact with today, and people who have really helped me, start my own business. So I thank them all the time for what they've done for me. Periodically, I was bored with my job. As Anita said, I got very bored with that job because it was a very boring job. And I would look for other jobs. In retrospect, I didn't know what I was good at doing until I did a program. And it was during the time that the ADA was starting, and employers were beginning to comply with the ADA. This was 20 years ago. And what happened was, the law is great. The law is a fabulous law. I'm not saying anything bad about the law. But what's really going to help people with disabilities get jobs is not the law. It's going to be people talking to people like I am today. So what happened was, I decided that attitudinal training needed to happen. And I found this program called Windmills, which was really a great program. And I went down to Washington, and I took the trainer class. It was great. At first, I started conducting just some training sessions living a kind of double life. My work didn't know about my trainings, and my trainings didn't know about my job. I kept them both very separate and very privately together. And as my business grew, there's one other thing I did want to tell you about doing this training is, at first I used to get so nervous before I got up in front of a room full of people. Like, you guys would right now, I would be like, shaking. And now the reason why I don't do that anymore is because I think that what I'm doing is so much more important than me as one individual, that it's not about me anymore. It's about the other 54 million people as well with disabilities. So I kind of stopped myself from getting nervous. You would think that would make me more nervous, but it doesn't. For some reason, I let it go. I let those nerves go because it was important for me to do it, because that way I could do it right. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? It's more important than I am as one individual just doing this. So that's why I don't make myself crazy about it anymore. So anyway, at first I started only doing sessions, and then as I was building my business, my first real client consulting job was with the Metropolitan Museum of Art. I stayed there for about a year. Then my first corporate job was working for J.P. Morgan Chase, or at that time it was the Chase Manhattan Bank. I made it through the merger, and I continued with them for 4 years. Currently, I'm working with Cornell a lot and developing my own programs, and it's really been an amazing ride for me. And also, I have something, as my friend John always says, it's called a personal board. I have a personal board of directors, and there are people in my life who are very honest with me, but who also care about me and also have my interests at heart. So I recommend that to everybody in the work field, because you need that personal board of directors to kind of set you in the right direction. And you're the president of your own board. So I just want you guys to know that. You are the president. You can fire people from your board if they get really negative with you. So, okay. So, you really want people on that board to act encouraging and who cares about you, but who can also tell you, honey, what you did was wrong. You need people like that too. And on July 26, 2010, the ADA turned 20 years old. It's been 20 years. Really incredible. There were celebrations in Washington, D.C., and all over the country. The ADA is considered the largest sweeping piece of civil rights legislation since the Civil Rights Act of 1964. We have seen so much improvement in the lives of people with disabilities. We've seen ramps, curb cuts, elevators on subway stations and train stations, braille and raised signage, phone relay system, closed captioning, and more technology than you could ever imagine. By enacting this law, the U.S. Congress has said to 54 million people that we matter, we belong, we are included in the hopes and dreams and aspirations of America and even beyond, that we can make a contribution. That being said, however, the ADA, there is still 65% unemployment rate among people with disabilities. The employment rate has gone up because, unemployment's gone up considerably in the country, so the disability unemployment rate has also gone up too. That translates into 20 million people. There are too many issues to discuss here today about why this has happened. However, I will say the causes range from everything from employers not wanting to hire to lack of education. No person with a disability should suffer the heartache that I went through to get a job. Getting out of college, 2.5 years it took me to land a job. And my ultimate success came from me starting my own business through just sheer perseverance and me being a large pain in the tush to all my potential clients. You're gonna hire me, right? You want me to come, right? You know what I'm like, right? I know what you're like. Okay. All right, so I also had even though my childhood was painful and difficult, I was very lucky too. I am one of the lucky ones, even though, damn, I'm losing my place. Okay. I went through college, grew up in an upper middle class family, and went to some of the best public school systems in the country. And I also got a joyful educational summer experience. And I had a mother who always expected that I was going to have a career, go to college and have a career. She did believe in me, even though sometimes she can be a pain, she does believe in me. To quote my rock hero, Bruce Springsteen, yes, the boss. How many Springsteen fans do we have here? All right, yay. Okay. Work is an essential part of the human experience, end quote. To go out every day and make your mark on society is important to the way that we feel about ourselves. It ties into how we feel about ourselves and our dignity. That's one of the reasons why people mourn when they lose a job. You always see like the people not worrying about the money. The first thing they worry about the money. The second thing is like a loss of dignity. When people lose their jobs, it's also a loss of money, but it's also a loss of dignity too. I know that people walk around complaining about their jobs all the time, but think, where would you be without one? For me, even if I didn't need to earn any money, I would have to do something to make myself feel useful. A friend of mine said to me at one point, I believe that people with disabilities are some of the most creative people in the world, because they've always had to figure out other ways of doing things. What would happen if we could unleash that creativity to the world? Thank you. Sorry, I stammered. I do have a reading disability, but you guys bear with me. Any questions?
Did you want to go over some of your slides, Jessica?
Sure. Okay. And then maybe we'll have some questions, I hope. Okay, as I said, there are 54 million people. Now there are 65% of people with disabilities unemployed now. Instead of 60, I forgot to fix that. There are 70% of people with severe disabilities are unemployed. 78% of minorities with disabilities are unemployed. 55% of college graduates with disabilities are unemployed. And 60 million people will have a psychiatric disability sometime in their lives. The aggregate income is $200 trillion. The disposable income in the disabled community is $200 billion. And these numbers are increasing because, especially the aging baby boomer part, and we all know who we are. So anyway, I really wanted to ask you guys if you had any questions for me. Yeah?
I have a question. Let me get you on the line. Oh, okay.
Testing. I have a 5-year-old, and I wanted to know, what is something that I could do for her, as a child to maybe learn a little bit more about accepting, people with disabilities when she sees them, but as well also for me. I don't necessarily work directly with anyone who has disabilities or know anyone. What is it that I could do, to learn a little bit more and help me with accepting disabilities as well?
You could, there's a lot of children's books that are written about people with disabilities. I read a children's book when I was a child about Helen Keller. It's always a good place to start because, she was one of the first people who was blind and deaf who really made it in the world. There are stories about, sit down with your 5-year-old and watch the Temple Grandin movie. It's a wonderful thing to watch.
Jessica, I was going to ask you, and I think this is a follow-up to that question, but...
You want to give him the mic?
In our workplace, what are some of the common things that we might do that might be disrespectful to people with disabilities that we may not be aware of? And I think you have a slide that may cover that one.
Do not condescend to people with disabilities. We don't like it. Do not assume that we have multiple disabilities because a person can't see doesn't mean that they can't hear. Because there is a term called assumption of multiple disabilities, like if you're in a wheelchair, like then you gotta be deaf too because they're talking to the person that you're with. So, what's that all about? Triangulated conversation, like talking to a person about the person in front of the person. There's a lot of things that you wouldn't want to have done to you, then don't do it to somebody else. That's the golden rule. If you're talking to a deaf person and they have a sign language interpreter, don't talk to the sign language interpreter, talk directly to the deaf person. The sign language interpreter is only there as a communication device. You don't have to be obnoxious to them, but they're not really there to facilitate communication. They're not there to say, tell that person, no.
So do people with disabilities want to be treated like everybody else?
Yes and no. We want to be treated like we're unique individuals that we are. Will you treat both how many children do you have?
2.
Do you treat them both the same?
Absolutely not.
Right. So same thing. You want to be treated like an individual.
You have this comment on here about assisting without permission. So what do you mean by that? What is meant by that?
It means that you don't go up and assist somebody with a disability without their permission. Can I get that for you? Can I get the door for you? Do you need help with that? And if the person doesn't look like they need help, then don't ask. The person looks like, and you should never push somebody else's wheelchair because that's kind of like their personal space. Never grab onto their wheelchair. Don't Don't use it like I'm using this for leaning on. Don't do that. It's not yours. It's part of their personal space. So.
We have a question back here.
Oh, what's a good resource for younger kids to read if they've got one or in a class with a disability? A resource for books, educational resources.
I don't hear you talking.
No, it's not.
Yes, it is.
What is a resource for younger kids when it comes to disability? Something they can read, or how does one find out about books for young kids with disability coming to grips with their own disability?
I don't know. I don't really deal that much with children with disabilities, so I don't have an answer for you about that. But there were really, there are websites, look it up. And if you give me your card, I'll get some information for you, but I know that that Maria Shriver wrote a book about a child with an intellectual disability, and I know that there are books available, novels and true stories available. Get a book about Helen Keller. Yeah. That's always good. That's always a good start. Get the Temple Grandin book. She wrote a book called Thinking in Pictures.
I was thinking more of books for kids, maybe for somebody who's 5 or 6 year old.
It's really fun? Sign language books. Anything to do with sign language, because kids love that. And it's a fun way for them to learn about disability and differences. So.
Jessica, you mentioned, and when you were providing the DAC training, you were talking about some practical things that we can do in our bank or in our place of employment around recruitment, for example. Would you mind sharing a little bit about that?
Okay, these are some of the recruitment programs that I know about, and the Business Leadership Network, the Independent Living Centers, which there's got to be one in Atlanta. There are both rehab agencies. There's the Workforce Recruitment Plan program, which is run out of the federal government. There's Entry Point, which is entrypoint.org. They're wonderful. And then there's Career Opportunities for Students with Disabilities, which is run out of the University of Tennessee. Entry Point is in Washington, D.C. That's where they're based in, but they can find you interns. And I always recommend to people internships, because I really do believe that's going to bring the number down. And also, I'm trying, also the World Health Organization and the World Bank just came out with a report, and I didn't get a chance to read it yet, but I read a synopsis of it, and it's just awful. And the picture is pretty dismal about lives of people with disabilities around the world. We're less healthy, we tend to be economically disadvantaged, unemployed. I mean, and I was like reading it going, surprise, surprise, there was nothing that surprised me about it. And that to me is the saddest thing about it, is that it wasn't a surprise to me. Anyway, any other questions?
You mentioned earlier your struggle with fine motor skills and how that impacted your use of something like a typewriter. I'm curious about today how technology helps you or enables you, and also some ways it might challenge you personally.
Well, I just bought a smartphone, and there are tiny buttons on the smartphone. you know, my friend keeps on telling me, you'll get the hang of it. I said, no, well, you know, if I can write 2 words in 10 minutes on a smartphone, I'm lucky. And it's very hard for me. So that poses a challenge for me. The typing has gotten better on the actual keyboard because I use it more. And what I would love to do is get a voice-activated system that really works. You know, that is really, you know, everything is like, email me this, email me that. Like the first time when I spoke to Anita, I said, look, you'll get a very short email from me and it really won't express who I am as a person, so I much rather talk to you. And a lot of the time what will happen is I'll leave her a message on her voicemail and she'll email me back. And that works fine for me, but the first time to get to know me, it's kind of like hard to do through an email because I'm not that great at it. So it takes me a long time, and I'd rather talk to the person and like so they can get to know who I am as a human being and not just something on a screen which is going to come out to be mistyped. You know, so there's a challenge with the emails and the typing and that kind of stuff, and it's gotten better and worse in both ways, if you know what I'm saying. So I communicate better verbally, but it's been something, you know, like people would get, you know, like 2-sentence emails from me, and I said that to them, and I will talk to them about it before, and I will say, you will never get me to write you out long emails, so forget it, because it ain't gonna happen. It took me 5 days to write that speech. I mean, you know, so the ideas are all floating around in my brain. It's just a matter of getting it down on the paper, which is often the challenge for me. Yes?
Can you talk, you mentioned, I guess this is on, you mentioned it was difficult to find work when you got out of college and how long that took. Can you talk about maybe one interview in particular that you had an experience in that was difficult, or you felt like the person really didn't understand you or didn't get what you were trying to tell them?
Well, there was one I described at the rehab center where the guy asked me if I got along well with normal people. And then there was this other interview I went on where I said to the person, I have CP, and he looks at me, he says, since birth? As if that was any of his business. And you know, what I recommend that people do is, if people, they're in a wheelchair, it's obvious to you, it's obvious to them. And a lot of times I'll bring up my disability in a very positive way. I'll say, gee, it makes me more creative at doing this, or it makes me better at doing that, or it makes me more of a stick-to-itive kind of a person. So I always try and bring it up in a positive way so that people can think, oh, instead of like people like looking at me and scratching their heads and saying, what's going on with her? You know, so the interview isn't being taken up by them thinking something that isn't true or whatever. And also I had an experience one time, and I was drinking a Diet Coke. I know I'm in Coca-Cola country, and I absolutely love Diet Coke, but I know it's not good for you. So I've been cutting back a lot on my soda drinking. And I've been drinking more water. I've been trying to drink more water. And of course, I've been drinking whatever the water is that Coca-Cola makes. Figure out, throw it in there. I buy whatever cheapest in the store. You know, and I flip a bottle home. So anyway, so you know, so I'm drinking my diet soda, and he walks up to me and says, diet soda is not good for you. You have MS. I said, no, I don't. I have CP. It's fine for me. You know, I mean, they were doing like this whole thing about like MS and diet soda being bad for people with MS. And wound up it wasn't true anyway. It was kind of like this urban legend. I mean, it's not good for anybody. But, and don't tell the Coca-Cola people that I said that. So anyway, so I've had a couple of really bad experiences, but it was like more of like just saying to myself, do I really want to apply for this job? Because 20% of the job requires typing and I don't type fast enough, or you know, or that kind of stuff. That would be more of my not wanting to apply for a job. And I went to disability agencies, I went to employment agencies, like regular employment agencies, and they would give me a typing test and they would say, what are you doing here? You know? So it was just like, I have a degree, you know, and obviously that didn't mean very much to anybody. So, because I didn't have a lot of the skills that they want, and more entry-level people usually do the typing. They're usually people that do that kind of stuff, or at least that used to do that kind of stuff. So what my recommendation to you is, don't look at a person and say the person can't type, well, you know, or they can't do something that may be a minimal part of the job that can be passed along to somebody else. Or, you know, they talk about essential functions versus marginal functions in the ABA. Well, you better make sure that's an essential function before you try to, like, make somebody with a disability who can't do it and use it as an excuse for not hiring them. Because then you're missing out on something else. Yes?
Hello. Oh. When I saw the statistics you had up about the number of Americans with disabilities, it brings to mind that there are, as you've said, many different types of disabilities. Where do you think companies that you've worked with from personal experience or from your knowledge in working with companies on being considerate of disabilities, where have companies progressed well in terms of certain types of disabilities? They may have found ways to incorporate that into their job functions. And what are some other types of disabilities where companies aren't doing well and they need to make greater strides to accommodate individuals with those types of disabilities?
Well, that's kind of a bizarre question, because I kind of think that it's never the disability, it's always the assumptions about what the person with a disability can and cannot do. I think that we've made some really good progress about wheelchair users, because as long as a person can get into the building, they're fine. Where we haven't made progress is around my disability, CP, and a lot, you know, the standardized thing is a white guy in a wheelchair. You know, that's what we see, you know, like as the standard of people. You know, you don't see a lot of people, you know, because that's the symbol of disability, is the guy in the wheelchair. And, you know, maybe we shouldn't talk about a symbol anymore, because only 2 million people use wheelchairs all the time anyway, out of 54 million people. So maybe it's a bad symbol to use. Maybe we should be using an open door or something, you know, that's more generic. But that's the sign of disability. So if you're not in a wheelchair, then you're not disabled. You know, it's kind of like this mentality that people have about that whole thing. So I think that we've made wonderful strides on accessibility issues, wonderful strides on communications issues for deaf people too, because, you know, speaking of what we talked about before, you know, deaf people are completely opposite of me, because whereas they use texting as communicating, you know, it used to be that they used to need special pagers, text pagers. Get a smartphone with unlimited texting, you can do whatever you want. So, you know, I knew people who used to email back and forth into their offices, you know, instant messaging, because the other person was deaf, and the instant messaging would work better. Well, I used to have a deaf person on my panel, and he would get emails from me, you know, very short emails, and he would say, okay, I'll be there, or okay, I won't be there. But, you know, I figured out a way of communicating with him, but for me, it was more of a challenge. So, you know, kind of like the blind leading, leading the person with the deaf leading the person with the learning disability, whatever. It was weird. It was just very funny. Anyway, go ahead.
Final question. Hello? Okay. We talked a little bit in our DAC training about different assessment opportunities for people with disabilities. I know the norm, you look at an interview or look at a GPA, but can you share with us the different assessments that can be used when you're interviewing or recruiting someone with a disability?
Okay. Okay. I love this because it shows the performance level of the job performance predictor. Now, you will only get as far as 50% of a correction as far as the performance of any employee, 54%. So the educational level, which is right here, well, that's only like 10% of somebody. It's not nothing, but it's only 10%. And the academic performance is only 20%. So when you're talking about people with disabilities, and you're talking about like past job experience, with 1 to 3 years related experience, 42%. You know, it's better than nothing, but the most that you will get out of a prediction will be 54%, and that's a work sample. So I guess the way that we can help people with disabilities gain employment is in order to have a job, in order to get a job, you need to have already had a job. Well, some people with disabilities have never worked because they've never had the opportunity. Nobody's ever hired them. So what I'm saying to you is, you know, I gave DAC some of this, you know, these questions about whether or not you want, what kinds of questions you should ask somebody on an interview. And instead of it being about the job, you can make them broad-based questions. You can make them hypothetical work sample questions. You can make them compare and contrast questions. You can make them behavioral questions. It doesn't necessarily have to be about having a previous job. What did you do at school? Were you involved in any programs at school? Did you involve yourself in any volunteer activities? What did you do in the volunteer activities? You know, what kinds of things have you done in the past that would help me being able to, I have to go, right? We're done.
No.
You have another question?
To the end of our program, just
Okay.
to make sure that everybody had an opportunity to thank Jessica for her time.
And if you got any questions that you want to ask me, come up afterwards.
I think we all can kind of relate to Jessica's story in some form or fashion. I know from the first grade probably through the sixth grade, all the photos that I took, I stood like this because I was afraid to be taller than everybody else. So I've always hunched over. I always felt like something was wrong with me or different because I was so tall. My mother even kind of put that feeling in my mind a little bit when we go back home to Panama to visit when people weren't as tall as me. She was always worried that people were going to stare at me. And then it wasn't until I got to college that I felt more self-assured and I felt good about it. I even started wearing heels. You know, it didn't matter to me. I realized that my height and the fact that people used to tease me, the Jolly Green Giant, the Jolly Brown Giant, every giant you could imagine I was called in school, that did help to make me a little bit stronger. And kids are mean, and they can pick at you and make you feel like your self-esteem isn't where it should be. So we can all relate in some form of fashion. I wanted to make sure that the one thing that we took away from this is to remember that we all are different in some kind of way. We're trying to increase awareness. We want to make sure that everybody understands the differences and appreciates those differences, at least respects it here at the Federal Reserve Bank. So that any message that you see coming from DAC or coming from ODI or OMWI, that message is increase awareness and that we have an inclusive environment. So just kind of take that as your takeaway. That's it.
Thank you.
Yeah, please fill out the evaluations. You can take them back to your desk if you like and bring them back to one of the DAC members.